Good afternoon. The time is now 5 o'clock. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education special regular meeting for Wednesday, February 4th, 2026 will please come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Colleagues, Alicia Little,
Here.
Paris Bendy,
Here.
Sheila Pryor,
Here.
Heidi Cater,
Here.
Valentina Ears,
Here.
Dan Ginestra is present, Milan Sahoni.
Present. Thank you. We have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda items. There are no consent agenda. There's no consent agenda today. And there are 3 items on the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I move. I second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please take a roll call vote?
Colleagues, Paris Bendy,
Yes.
Sheila Pryor,
Yes.
Heidi Cater,
Yes.
Valentina Ears,
Yes.
Dan Ginestra votes yes, Alicia Little,
Yes.
Milan Sahoni.
Yes. Thank you. We have an agenda. All right. All 3 items on the agenda relate to the superintendent search. As you might be aware, the school board has hired MSBA to assist in the search. Also assisting is Wayzata's Executive Director of Human Resources, Dave Lutz. Barb Dorn, Director of Executive Search Services at MSBA, will present the 3 items. Barb, please take over.
Thank you, Chair Sahoni, members of the board. It's nice to see you again. I'm really pleased to be here tonight to take the next step in the superintendent search for Wayzata Public Schools. I'm going to cover 3 things tonight, and there are going to be a few things I'd like to have discussion with the board and get some consensus around direction. The first thing we will do is review the public engagement summary report, which I know you've all had a chance to review already, but I do want to walk through and talk a little bit about the compare and contrast the information from the different groups within the school communities. After we've gone through that, I'm going to make a recommendation about next steps in terms of getting input and interaction from your school communities with your finalists. I think in a district this size, this complex, that would be a logical next step, especially based upon the volume of feedback we got from folks that are invested in this search process. So we'll get to that as well. The next would be the interview training, MSBA interview training, and I do have the packets here I'll pass out when we reach that point. It's important that all of you are comfortable with the process you're going to undertake, round 1 with a subcommittee and second round with the full board. Because this is a public position, paid for with taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure that you are very aware of some of the things around an HR perspective of what you can and cannot ask and things such as that. So that'll be the second item we do. And then the third is I have proposed some questions for the subcommittee to use in round 1. We've specifically built them around your leadership profile for Wayzata and the results from this public engagement summary report. So I'm going to distribute those. I think there's quite a few, but we want to winnow it down to maybe 10 to 15. And I'll walk you through how we're going to do that, because we're going to do it without reading the questions out loud in a public meeting, where some folks who watch this meeting will have an advantage by knowing what the questions are. But we'll get to that as the third item. So that's what I intend to cover in about the next hour and a half to 2 hours. Is that all right with the board, or are there any questions before we get started? All right, wonderful. So let's talk about the engagement report first. I'm going to fire up the computer, and Amy has helped me already. It was working, but it went to sleep. So give me just a moment here. Here we go. And the copies you have in front of you, board members, are yours. You can write on those, take notes, whatever you'd like to do. I want you to have those and to keep those. I also would like to make this relatively informal. So as I go through and point out what we feel are the highlights in this report, feel free to interrupt me and ask me questions along the way. I'm going to zoom in on this a little closer, I think, for members of the public who might be watching it online. I will also ask the board, upon the conclusion of reviewing the report, if you'd like to place it on the website so that all of the folks who participated can see this, as well as your applicants. But we will get to that in just a moment. So first of all, this is the overall report. I will say that I chuckle a little bit when we have a summary to present to the board, and the summary is 68 pages long. That's longer than we've ever had with a report. You also had a record number of people participating in this survey, so congratulations on that. We will work through a couple of things here. First of all, the quantitative data, I'm going to review. When you can slice and dice data and compare, that's really helpful. And so that's what we're going to do first. Secondly, I'm going to do a high-level overview of the themes that emerged from all of the focus groups we conducted, as well as all the open-ended questions that were in the survey itself. And then we're going to wrap up with talking about the students. Student voice was extremely well represented here. Very excited about that, and it merited its own section in terms of those qualitative answers and what's on the top hearts and minds of your students here in Wayzata. So those are the things we're going to cover. A lot of the specificity around the quotes that support the themes, I'm not walking through tonight because it's a lot, and I know you've had a chance to read it yourself. So I'm just going to do the high-level overview next. So in general, when I'm looking at this report, I did mention you had a record number of participants. 2,025 people completed this survey. The expected amount, we have an average percentage based upon the size of your student body. The expected amount for Wayzata was just over 1,600. So you put that in a rearview mirror pretty decisively. So thank you to those 2,025 people that took the time to fill this out. You'll see that the vast majority were in English. You had 2 in Spanish and no surveys returned in Somali. It was also offered in hard copy in all 3 languages. What I want to reassure the board of, though, is just because people whose native language might not be English, because they didn't take the survey in their own language, doesn't mean they didn't participate. I think what a lot of people have found when they have a very diverse population in terms of language, many of those people want to take it in English, and they'll take it with the assistance of their student from the school or one of the liaisons in the district or a neighbor or a friend. So it doesn't mean people didn't participate if their first language was Somali or Spanish. It's not unusual to have almost everything, if not everything, in English instead. So it was opt-in. Nothing was required. Also, people did not have to answer every single question in this survey to be included. Some people only answered 2 or 3 of the questions. Their data is in here as well. It was not an all or nothing from people who participated. Now, the self-identifiers are right here. You'll see that just over 41% of the respondents identified as a parent or guardian. 37% selected student. Almost 17% are staff members. 2% community members, 1% other, and under 1% business owner or district partner. And I recognize that everyone can have more than one category. And so some people, for example, might be a staff member and a parent. They may have taken that in 2 different lenses if they had a different email address or URL address. However, the vast majority of folks pick the one lens that they are looking through when they fill this out, and that's how the data was quantified based on that response. You'll see the areas of expertise out of 17 choices. This is what rose to the top overall. Budget and finance was the top area of expertise that folks are looking for, followed closely by collaborative leadership, curriculum development and evaluation, strategic planning, educational equity, and student testing results and achievement. Those are broken out here a little bit later in this report. So if we go to the next page, we ask a very simple question. Is it important that the new superintendent have previous experience as a superintendent? It was a very even split, with about 53% of respondents saying yes and almost 47% saying no. I'm not a statistician. I believe that, however, is well within the margin of error for it to be really, really close. So nothing decisive in terms of who felt that the superintendent should have been a superintendent already. Just very evenly split. That is also a question we asked the board, which is how the pregnancy brochure was developed, because you took that same exact survey. Specialized skills. Again, these are going to be broken out in more detail here in just a moment, so I'm going to go through that a little quickly, but that is out of about 24 choices. These are the top 6 that rose up for the totality of people who responded to the survey. And the personal characteristics, you can see number 1 being effective communicator. We also have broken those up, a respondent category here in just a moment. And now we're going to get into the tables themselves. So you can see here that 836 parents or guardians are represented here, 751 students. Thank you to those students for their voices being included. 340 staff members, 42 community members, 24 identified as other. Sometimes that is grandparent, taxpayer, former board member. They just have a different title they'd like to use. 15 business owners, 13 district partners, and 4 people skipped that question. First of all, the previous experience required. The only things I want to point out here that I thought were of interest were your staff members. Almost 61% said yes. That is higher than the average of all of the groups combined together. So 61% of staff members said, yes, we'd like them to have experience as a superintendent, while 39% said no. Your community members actually had the largest differentiation here, where they said about 74% said, yes, we should have a superintendent with superintendent experience from those 42 community members. And then your business owners were the opposite, where 71% of business owners said, no, don't need to have former superintendent experience in order to be considered for the position. So those are the only interesting traits. Otherwise, you can see everyone else, it is a pretty even split across the board. Yes.
A quick question. Was there a minimum age for the participant? So students could be from middle school, high school?
There was no minimum age.
Minimum. Okay, thank you.
Typically, it's high school. Typically, those are the more engaged students, civic-minded students. Sometimes middle school kids will take it as well, but most of them are most likely 9 to 12th graders. Okay, thank you for asking. So now let's look at these areas of expertise. All right, 6 areas of expertise. I'll just point out a few trends. So first of all, the budget and finance that rose to the top out of everyone. That rose up partly because the largest respondent group, parents and guardians, did have that as their number one concern, budget and finance. But it was identified in the top 6 for all 7 of these self-identified groups. All 7 groups have budget and finance in there. Curriculum development and evaluation are in 6 of these 7. And interestingly, and not unusually, staff members do not have curriculum development evaluation in their top 6. They are very familiar with curriculum already, and they may not see that as being something the superintendent needs to have with the resources and the leadership team you have inside the district around curriculum. So staff was the only group that did not have curriculum in their top 6 here. Strategic planning was in 5 of these. The only groups that didn't mention strategic planning were students and other. And I think that's partly explained by students aren't really plugged into what a strategic plan is. So that makes a lot of sense as well. Collaborative leadership is another one that was in all 7. That is important to every single person that took this survey in any of these categories. So collaborative leadership is something we're going to want to stress in the interview questions, for example. And then I thought this was very interesting. Student testing results and achievement. It made the top 6 overall. It's only in 2 of the respondent categories, however, and it is the parents and guardians and your students. So those 2 largest groups are the reason that student testing results and achievement are in the top 6 for the entire group. And students and parents and guardians don't always see eye to eye, but in Wayzata, they do, because they both prioritized that for them. School facilities are in 2 groups, district partner and parents and guardians. That's top of mind for those folks, and I'm sure that's not a surprise with the referendum coming up as well. Just a few other things I noticed when I looked at this as well. The student groups prioritized 2 things that do not surprise me: educational equity and social and emotional support services. And very often those are closely tied together. So when I looked at that, I see educational equity or social and emotional support services also in the top 6 for staff members. They have educational equity and cultural competency, which many people see those as being married very closely. Also, community members have cultural competency, and folks who are in the other category chose educational equity as well as cultural competency. So I think this shows alignment amongst those different stakeholder groups very, very well. I'm going to move on to 6 personal characteristics unless you have questions on this thus far.
But between curriculum development evaluation and then student testing results and achievements, can you elaborate, like how close are they or how different are they?
In terms of how far up?
Yeah, so when we look at curriculum development, yes, that's a separate bucket. But the evaluation, is it closely tied with student testing results and achievement? Or again, it sounds like they are connected, but they are not. Just trying to...
I think
Can you
they
remind
are,
us again?
yeah, they're very different for people who understand what those things are. Others probably blur the lines a little bit. I'd need to look at the raw data to know how close it is in
Oh,
terms of number.
sure. Okay.
I think a lot of people see those as being pretty closely tied.
Yeah, and that's where, because I think the curriculum development was 3rd, and then student testing results achievement was last. So I was wondering, should they be clubbed together? Is it enough relevance, or they are so much apart that they need to be looked at as different items?
I think they're similar enough, and I know you addressed this in your leadership profile, which we're going to get to with the really colorful page here in a moment. So that's a wonderful question. Thank you,
Oh.
Dr. Bindi.
Thanks.
Personal characteristics, you can see them broken out here by groups as well. An effective communicator is desired by all 7 groups. Someone who is ethical, desired by all 7. Someone who's transparent, they're looking for that. 6 of the groups had that in their top 6. The only one that didn't was students. Again, transparency might be a word that not a lot of students consider as much as some other things, but 6 out of 7 had transparent. 7 out of 7 had problem solver. And again, this list that was given to folks in the survey were 17 different things. So the consistency across in your top 6 is really quite impressive. Problem solver, 7 people. 4 groups asked for someone who's empathetic to be prioritized. And again, that includes your 2 largest groups, parents and guardians and students. So empathy, soft skills are going to be important to those 2 groups. And then someone who's consistent also is in 5 of the groups. So perhaps no surprises there as well, but again, that vertical or horizontal alignment amongst the groups is a very good sign. The next page is the more specifics about how does your leadership profile align or not align with what people told us in this survey. And when I look at this page, what I'm looking for are colors, because the way that we code this is the colors are the same. And so you could see, for example, the board's specialized skills on the left side. This is the apples to apples comparison we always talk about. On the left side, your specialized skills 1 through 10. Those correlated into the leadership profile, which is up above. And that leadership profile is what is in your vacancy brochure. That's what drove applicants to this job because they felt their values aligned with your leadership profile. When you look at the specialized skills from the public input side of things, look at how many of those align with your board. 9 out of 10. And this is out of a list of 24 different things. So this is, in my opinion, an extraordinary amount of alignment between what you, 7 people, identified as needed in the next leader and what the public has now confirmed with their results. So this is a very good thing. We don't always see so much color. There might be 2 or 3 things that both groups are looking for. You have a lot. So that, to me, is very exciting, and I think it indicates that this board is very in tune with the different constituent groups in Wayzata Public Schools. Similarly, all 3 areas of expertise that rose to the top, budget and finance, collaborative leadership, and curriculum development, those were already in your leadership profile as well. So congratulations to the board. I think you did a nice job designing a profile that your community would support. Are there any questions on this page from anyone? Okay, I won't dwell on that anymore then. The next page is specialized skills. This is a really great one because it is the apples to apples broken out by stakeholder groups. And so, for example, you'll see that the number 1 for parents and guardians is leads with honesty, etc. 6 of the groups had this in their top 6 as well, which is tremendous. For some groups, it's a given. Well, of course, they have to be honest and ethical. It just has to be. And yet, calling it out, boards typically do that just to ensure that candidates know we're going to look into their core values as a leader. School finance, all 7 groups had that in their top. 6, develop and direct an effective leadership team. 6 of your groups identified that as being important. However, the only group that didn't mention develops and directs an effective leadership team are your students. And yet, the second one for your students is delegates authority while maintaining accountability. And I think students' minds, that could be very similar, correct? So I would say the idea of developing an effective leadership team and holding people accountable, all 7 groups prioritize that. Let's see, the strategic plan only popped up in 3 different groups. In the parents and guardians, it was number 1 for community members and district partners, about halfway down. So the strategic plan is top of mind for parents and guardians, community members, and district partners. And then I thought this was another interesting one. Experience in implementing practices that support student safety and mental health. Top 6 for your parents and guardians, right? Only 1 other group had it in their top 6, and it happened to be district partners had it in there as well. I have to admit, though, the list is tough to choose from because, again, it's 24 extremely important things. And so just because something rises up to be in the top doesn't mean everything else is unimportant. It simply helps guide candidates and MSBA and the board to know what the highest of the high priorities are as we're going through the applications and the vetting process. So that was in those two groups. Communication skills were in 5 of the 7 different groups, obviously important to folks. And then I made a star by a couple of different things here that I thought interested me. So your students had 2 things that to me kind of falls within that collaborative leadership, diversity, equity, inclusion kind of area. Students say they want someone who develops trust and works collaboratively with diverse groups and community, and they have knowledge of and experience with equity, leadership challenges, and opportunities. So those are relatively close. I'd call those sort of shoulder priorities. Students identified them. Staff members are looking for someone to work collaboratively with diverse groups. The other category is looking for someone to work collaboratively with diverse groups. Your business owners are looking for the same thing, collaborative leadership with diverse groups. And so I think there's a theme within those other areas, these last 6 group, that resonates in that same area. And then interestingly enough, being visible and accessible was really important to your staff. And that might be because Dr. Anderson is so accessible and so visible, and it matters to the staff. So that was important to the staff. It was also important to people in the other category, but that sort of struck me as a staff interest. And the last thing I noticed is on the far right side, your business owners and district partners called out 2 things that others didn't, which is experience in leveraging technology, AI tools, and web-based education curricula. And then district partners talked about having a visionary and creative approach to problem solving. And so some of that cutting edge thinking and visionary creative capabilities, those 2 groups did prioritize. And that is in your leadership profile, vision and ingenuity. So any questions on that? This is my favorite one because it's apples to apples and it does show how people align this way and with you as a board. It's all good news. Yes.
So remind me again, when you ask respondents to put themselves in a specific category, did they have choice of only one or did they have multiple choices?
They could only choose one.
Okay, because community member only 42, I'm pretty sure a lot of these parent guardians could also be community members, right? So
Yep. I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I'm sorry.
You could do it from a different email
Yes.
address.
Like I did it as a parent and as a staff member, and everyone had that option. So as long as you were doing it, you could answer it differently.
Yeah, but I guess if I did it under one email, I would not really bother to do it under, because I don't know the importance of what these categories mean to the board, right?
Yes.
So to me, it looks like, community members showing only 42 of them responded is kind of
It's probably not
not give a good picture, right? Yeah.
correct.
So-
It's a much bigger picture than that
Right.
because if there was a category taxpayer, everyone could check that one. Community member, everyone could probably check that one. So it sort of asks people to put on a hat before they answer these questions.
Right.
And community member is who you are, but you are probably also first a parent or guardian
Right.
or a student or a staff member. So it's sort of the trickle down. So the folks that selected other or community member or even business partner probably just got there eventually. But the numbers are not, I would say, written in stone. It's just those are the hats folks selected when they selected their answers. So thank you for asking that. All right, the comments section, that is it. That's all we have for the quantitative. But the additional comments section, I'll just point out a few things. Of the 1,273 respondents who were not students, you had over 800 on average take the time to answer an open-ended question. That indicates high interest in sharing their thoughts qualitatively with us. So that's really exciting. We're going to get to the student comments here in just a minute as well. But when you look at this, these are the 4 questions we asked. All of the information from the focus groups are also woven into these comments. We asked similar comments in the focus groups, but probed quite a bit deeper with a lot more, tell me more about that, can you explain what you mean? So we have all of that data in here as well when we put together this report. So I want to thank the folks that came to the focus groups as well. So the good things taking place in the district, I'm just going to highlight the 5 themes. I'm not going to read all of them. I'll just read the bolded parts. And again, you've seen this. But the good things taking place here, there is a strong academic reputation and district performance. That was mentioned most often by the people who took the survey. Highly skilled and committed educators, a wide range of student opportunities, a positive school climate and student well-being, and a commitment to diversity and equity. Those are all wonderful things, and I hope people will take the time to read the representative comments under each of these themes, because there are some wonderful things being said about this district, and I think people really need to be proud of what is offered here in Wayzata Public Schools. The challenges, we always get more challenges than we do the great things that are happening, because challenges are top of mind for pretty much all the districts right now. There were 7 themes identified for that. The number 1 here is enrollment growth and capacity strain. I know these are not a surprise to the board, correct? But that was the number 1 concern cited by everyone except for the students. We're going to get to those in a moment. Challenges around academic direction and rigor, facilities planning and equity, financial pressures and funding uncertainty, staffing and workforce stability, and the complexity of equity and inclusion, and finally, technology and AI use in learning. A lot of divided opinions and concern about that. There was a question about what the next superintendent needs to know in order to succeed, and in this case, they identified 6 things for us. Number 1 was the legacy of academic excellence and community pride. Also, expectations for visible ethical leadership, a highly engaged and invested community, the impact of sustained growth and change, your commitment to academic rigor and high expectations, and increasing diversity across the district. That is what respondents said the next superintendent should know in order to succeed here. And then the additional comments, there was one, not everyone fills that out, it's a sort of a catch-all, but there was some themes around the importance of leadership continuity and approach to leadership. The next many, many pages are the details. I'm not going to go through these, but I'm going to put them up just for a moment so people at home or who watch this later are aware that there's a lot more to look through. I just don't want to bog down the meeting with the specificity here. So I'm going to jump ahead to page 52.
I have a question about
Yes.
these comments. These look like, you know, maybe shortened versions of people's comments. Or is this every comment summarized? This is just kind of the highlights, or how are these chosen to be put on here?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. So every single comment, whether it was in the focus groups or whether it was typed into the survey, an MSBA staff person read every single comment. So we want people to know that we laid eyes on everything anyone typed. Then what we do is we will put it into an AI tool to help us winnow down themes and patterns. And then the staff person that looked at all of those comments will find representative comments, sort of a catch-all that speak for a lot of folks in that same area. We don't include comments that might have names, include names, or anything that might be defamatory or inappropriate. We won't include those comments in here, but they are representative of the whole. And in some of these, in fact, I know that there are some areas here, like for the first one, that area of high-performing, well-run school district, 274 related responses pulled that up. So we don't have 274 comments in here, we probably have 50. And then there's a couple other later down here where it says, you know, the word budget was mentioned 19 times, or declining enrollment was mentioned 15 times. So we tried to summarize it in such a way that you'd be able to absorb it all and have it make some sense. But it's not commented, not edited comments. These are actual comments. Now, if someone wrote 2 paragraphs, we didn't include 2 paragraphs, maybe a sentence or 2 out of their paragraphs, but there was a lot to go through. Thank you for asking that, Director Pryor.
I have a specific question, and if you don't have the answer right now, that's okay. The AI tool that you used, is it a specialized AI tool for qualitative data creating of themes, or is it a generalized tool?
It is a generalized tool. Correct. Yep. Thank you for asking. The next we're going to do is student summaries, and that's going to forward ahead pretty quick, I hope, to page 52. I'm almost there. That's 46, okay. Lots and lots and lots of comments. There we go, student summary report on page 52. Again, a shout out to all of the students that took time to do this. 751 students took this and 530 on average responded, which we were very excited about.
Are these separate because on page 8 earlier, students were not a part of the category? The 800 out of 1273 that responded, right? Additional comments. The student are not in those comments. So are these the ones from the students?
These are the students starting on page 52.
Right. But on page
Everybody is together with the quantitative information in the first part of the report, where we broke it out by respondent category. That's everybody. And then we took all of the open-ended questions and put everyone except students in the first report that I just went through. And then we put the students here at the end because there were so many of them. And we just wanted to call out student voice separately. We didn't want them to get lost with the 1,800 adult voices. But the quantitative data was everybody all together. Does that make sense?
right. Yeah. So now you basically answered the question I had earlier. I was holding off on that because I thought maybe it's coming up later.
Okay.
And here it is. Yep.
Thank you. So for those students that took this survey, more than 500 again on average took time to answer the questions, which is phenomenal. They didn't just want to hit buttons and pick top 6. They wanted to talk and share their thoughts. So as far as the good things in the district, there were 4 themes that emerged for your students. Number 1 was the wide range of classes and activities. There's a welcoming and inclusive school culture. There are strong academic expectations. And there are supportive teachers and staff. That's what rose to the top for them. Now, one of my favorite things to do is to go and read all the student comments. And when you read what the students are saying about their experience in your schools, that just hits home. It's wonderful. So I would encourage everyone to take the time to read through every student comment that's in this report. It's wonderful stuff. However, they are not immune to seeing that there's challenges here. They identified these 4 themes, number 1 being enrollment growth and overcrowding. They're also aware of the financial pressures and funding concerns, technology and AI challenges, and facilities and space limitations. And when you do read the student comments on these, again, brilliant, brilliant minds at work here, and very insightful, including on things such as the use of AI in education. So I'll encourage you to read that, but those were the things they were concerned about. As far as what the next superintendent needs to know, they only identified 2 big categories. One was they want them to be approachable and student-centered as a leader. Very important to them. And they want the next superintendent to recognize the diversity of the school community here. And then finally, they did have an opportunity to tell us anything else you think. And we get lots of stuff about parking lots and menus and buses and things like that. However, we also get a lot of really wonderful stuff. And this says, deep down, what they're ultimately looking for is a leader who will listen and understand schools. That came out of the students. And then here are the comments that I was mentioning earlier. So I would encourage you to take some time on that. That concludes my overview of this report, but again, it is a lot. So my first question for the board would be, is it okay to place this report on the district website, on the superintendent search landing page? I'm seeing nods. It's by consensus. It doesn't need to be a motion, but I know that candidates are also very interested in seeing this, and I know the folks who took it would be excited to read it as well. So I'm hearing that as a yes.
I would say that we should do it. In my perspective, there's nothing but gains from it, and I think it's really important. As I'm looking at these results and thinking about results that we got from Peter Leatherman in particular, everything is so well aligned. I think what's really interesting is what's important to students is also important to staff, and having somebody who's visible, who has strong leadership, who's approachable. That's super interesting to me to see those two. So it's the people in the buildings who have similar needs. And I think parents and community partners both want to see a safe school. We have them, safe schools and buildings. We have them, but there's a concern to keep it that way, which I think is important. And that was also reflected in our Peter Leatherman report. And so from my perspective, board colleagues, I don't see any reason to not do it. I think it's mostly useful and good to have it out there.
before I say yes, I have a question. So when we posted the job, we had a profile that we also included, right? Profile of the new superintendent. So would this survey actually be very close to the profile that we expected from the candidate?
I think people would be very pleased to see the leadership profile aligning so closely with the results from this survey.
Okay.
And that tells them a couple of things. It would tell them that the board is in touch with your school communities. And if there are things in here that maybe aren't in the profile, we used this to vet all of the applications in addition to that profile. And we used this to help create interview questions. And I think
okay.
candidates would appreciate seeing more of that so they can prepare for perhaps their interviews too.
Right. I think if there is a strong alignment between the profile and this survey,
Very
there should not be any issue in posting this. Yeah.
I think and I'm sure Amy can give us more inputs, but the way you explained, right, how this information was pulled together, I think it would be helpful to put some summary there. So it's not literally, not every single response is documented. It's a summary. So I think if you were to give some context, because again, if folks are not listening to this conversation, if they pull up the link, we don't want them to think that their inputs haven't been taken into consideration. So I think putting some verbiage there will help along with this information.
Okay. We will do that. Anything else? Great. All right. Well, thank you very much. Did you have something?
I do. I have a question.
Yes.
And if this is not the right time, tell me. Do you see any gaps in what we collected? Is there anything that we missed as we're moving forward towards the next step? Or do you think that this was a robust enough? I mean, we got phenomenal turnout in these surveys. It's incredible how many responses we got. But do you see, or does MSBA see anything that we missed?
I actually had that conversation today with our Metro team about Wayzata. Short answer is no, because it is so thorough and supported by that colored page. If I can find that colored page again. The one thing we talked about was perhaps being very aware of the importance of technology and AI to the students in the business community, and maybe including things like that in our vetting process and the strength of folks understanding that as a tool in leadership development. So that was probably the one thing we talked about today that might require a little bit of a tweaking, but otherwise, no, I don't think there's any gaps. I think it's incredibly close, truly. Yeah. Okay.
And this is to build off of Heidi's question, just asking about how representative the survey is. With the incoming superintendent starting at the end of the school year, it's possible that a senior in high school might say, well, this individual will never be my superintendent, so I don't have an incentive to fill out the survey. Did you find, based on the suggestions or kind of comments students were making, that it was at least all 4 grades at the high school represented? Was there a viewpoint there?
That's a great question, Director Gymnast. I appreciate it. I don't know. I do know that the focus group we did was with 38 students at the high school, and they represented lots of different interests. And then within their own clubs and organizations, they were going to go out and encourage people to take the survey. I can't tell from the comments if someone maybe is 8th or 9th grade or 11th or 12th grade. I don't think there's any clear delineation. There wasn't a lot of talk about when I graduate or when I'm not in school next year or when I'm at university, whatever. There weren't those comments that indicated a lot of seniors were taking it, but that doesn't mean they didn't. They just focused on the here and now and the needs of the superintendent who's going to be here in July. But that's a wonderful question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just a clarifying statement that the focus group that you had with our students was with Fusion, which is a group. Is that correct? It's a group of many different organizations, and so it's a really nice cross-section of our students at the high school.
Correct. That was the Fusion group, correct, Director Lutz? Fusion, yes. Thank you for clarifying that. There's a great group. I learned a lot. All right, so the first question I have, besides can we put it on the website, and we will prepare some overview introductory paragraph for that. Do you hear the voices of your constituents in this report? Is it broad enough where the people that you have spoken with about the school and the direction you're heading, are they in here, or are we missing someone that you talk to a lot? Feels pretty all-encompassing? Okay, good, that's good. So what I'd like to do now is I do have a recommendation about next steps, because I know when we laid out the timeline, we talked about the fact that we don't want to make a decision about engagement during the interview process for your school communities until the board has seen this report and absorbed the information. So now that you have the information, we've looked it over, and I do have some recommendations, and so I want to run them by the board. And I think I'm gonna, can I just close this? Amy, could you close this since I'm not using it anymore? Thank you. This is what I would suggest, and I want your feedback on it. So because of both the size and the complexity of a district like Wayzata Public Schools, I would definitely recommend some interaction or input during the second round of interviews with the school communities. The interest in this, of course, is obvious, and I think your system is so big that getting more voices in the process at the end in round 2 would be beneficial to you as a board. So how to do that so it doesn't bog down the process, or it doesn't give away your authority as the hiring body for this position, because we don't want to have anyone believe that they get to tell you who to hire, right? They're not the hiring committee, that's you. However, from an advisory capacity, they may have some insights that you could use during your round 2 interviews and your deliberations. So what I might suggest is 2 things. Now, if you remember, on March 6th, you are conducting the board interviews, right? On March 5th, candidates have reserved a day in the district, and we said, we'll figure that out when the time comes. So the time is now. One of the things that I definitely think you should do is the district tours, building tours. You have a lot of buildings, but there could be representative schools that the finalists are taken through and given a tour by the principal in that building, and programs are talked about, and they'll see students in the halls and all of those things. It's really, really good for candidates to have that opportunity. I would also suggest that your executive leadership team accompany those folks on those tours. Let's say you have 3 people in the second round, to take them, all of them, with that person around, whoops, so they can answer questions, can also drive them between buildings and that sort of thing. So I think that involvement, so they get to know one another, would be really valuable. And I think we could create a pretty simple feedback tool for the senior leadership team to have some input to the board, not about who you should hire, but about the conversations and the strengths of the people that they were walking through the buildings with. So I think that would be really wise to do. I also think, though, because of how big the district is, that there should be an opportunity during that day for each finalist to meet with some sort of representative group. And one of the things that might work, and I actually spoke with Executive Director Lutz about this, is it went really well with the search preview meetings. I think we met with 5 or 6 or 7 groups, and we did focus groups with those same groups, and they felt like a really good cross-section of your school communities. Is asking for some folks to be either nominated or something from those groups to meet with the candidate for like 1 hour. I don't know if we call it an interview or not, but maybe an interview or maybe a Q&A. It might be 20, 30, might be 40 people, but we have an instrument that we use fairly often called an input form. And we ask people to indicate, the candidate they just listened to or interacted with, and we want them to share up to 2 or 3 strengths and up to maybe 2 or 3 opportunities for growth. I think if everyone individually had a chance to fill out that form, it wouldn't take very much for MSBA to take that information and condense it down into some themes that emerged from those 30 people. We'd also give you the raw data to look at. And I think I could have that to you by that Thursday night, by maybe around 6 o'clock, because we don't want it to take a lot of time, because you start interviewing right away Friday morning. But if we did those 2 things, and I'd like to hear what Executive Director Lutz thinks about that as well, those 2 I think would get you a lot of helpful information without having people tell you what to do. Does that make sense? What do you think, Executive Director?
Yeah, I'll add the comment. So oftentimes we use this in our interview processes in our district when we assemble an interview committee, and we use the term strengths and wonderments quite often, right? And so we have the individuals provide the strengths of a candidate, which are very helpful, and then those wonderments are things that the hiring administrators, which again the individuals making this hire would be the school board, should look out for in the next part of the process, right? And so you could take that feedback from those groups and make sure that questions that you're using in the final interview get at some of those wonderments that individuals saw when they interacted with those candidates. You could make sure that again you're considering those as you finalize this process. So I think it's a helpful way to gather that feedback, but also ensure that individuals stay within their role of that process, right? This is the board's decision to make, and you'd be using that feedback in a way that's appropriate versus we've really gotten away from interview committees ranking candidates or saying, hey, this is my person, because that's not their role in the process, right? So having them specifically serve that purpose of identifying strengths and wonderments has been a shift that we've made here in the district with our interview teams. And it really honors the people who are participating, because then you're using the feedback in the way that you intend to, right? And so that role clarity, but also a really good opportunity to continue what we've done throughout this process, which is engage with our school community members and make sure that there's voice throughout that process, so that by the end of it, when you're making your decision, you can feel like it was a very informed decision that represents the best decision for the district in general.
I have a quick question or an add-on comment. A wonderment, Dave, could also be something, for example, that didn't come up, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it could just be like, hey, we didn't get to this
I
topic.
wish I would have heard
Right.
more about the following.
Okay.
And then that's something that you can use as a lens for that next part of the process. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I like that term a lot. Thank you. Thank you. So how
You're
does that
welcome
sound
to
the board?
use it if you'd like, Barb. It's okay. You just have to credit me every time. No, I'm just kidding.
I just want to make sure that that's all right with the board, that the best way to proceed is probably at some point when you decide this is okay, is I just work directly with Executive Director Lutz to pull together the activities for the day of Thursday the 5th. So turn it back over to you,
So-
Chair.
Yeah, I'll let my colleagues comment first, and then I'll add a couple of comments afterwards. Yeah.
No, so I like the idea. Obviously, we need representation, but given the responses we have received, I think we will find candidates who can come and participate. So I think that's great. My only question is, as you summarize the information, and maybe we'll get to that in our next topic here, but when we look at questions and answers and kind of, will there be similar rubrics that we will get it when we go through the interviews and we can take notes? And again, if there are collaboration, communication, knowledge, making it up, right? So those are the three categories. So would you give us something along the same line as you are summarizing audience response?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So for the subcommittee as well as the board in round 2, once the questions are identified, we have a 3-point Likert scale that we use that the answer exceeded my expectations, their answer met my expectations, or I was disappointed. So E, M, or D. But we would have a rubric that says, if they say this, that's a good answer. If they say this, if it's missing these things, that's not so good. So we will have a rubric so that everyone's on the same page about what you expect. And I'm not too concerned if it's shoulder scores, if it's, a 2 and a 3 or a 1 and a 2. When it's someone's disappointed and someone's really excited about it, that's where the rubric is really helpful. So I think that's what we do.
Perfect, great. So based on your experience, what would be your recommendation? As a board member, should we be looking at those results before or after the interview? Because again, I don't want to get biased, right? Like I would want to go through the interview process, put my thoughts on paper, and then see what the responses are, from day before. Is that the right thing to do, or what is the best practice you have seen?
That's an excellent question. Typically, if it is done the day before, board members will look at it before the interview, just to get a heads up on some things that might have been concerning to people in the audience. Very often, that input is not provided in advance, however. It's provided during the board's interview. People watch your interview, and as you're interviewing candidates, they're typing in strengths and wonderments, so you see it after your interview in that case. But because we have the luxury of time that the entire day ahead of the interviews is being provided, unless you think you would be biased in some way, I think it would be helpful to read the highlights of what people in the school community is saying. And yet it will remain a personal choice. I think best practice might to look at it when you get it. And yet if someone's not comfortable, you can wait and do it afterwards if you'd like to.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick comment. Okay, so I'm very sensitive, and this might get a little bit, I'm very sensitive to not hearing all voices, or, making sure that we have even minority or underrepresented groups being a part of the process. Is there a way for us to make sure that we're not hearing the same voices over and over again throughout this process, but really making sure that we're getting different perspectives throughout each one of these different opportunities?
I'm going to defer to Executive Director Lutz. He knows the district so much better than I do. I definitely believe there's a way to do that, perhaps through Solveig and her team, but I'm going to defer to you if that's all right.
Yeah, so a couple of the things that we've already done, we did partner with our Department of Equity Inclusion to make sure that we have different roles in our district for engaging with some of our families that we maybe wouldn't hear from if we didn't have an active engagement with them. Some of those roles are our family partnership leads, and then also our family liaison specialists. So we did have a specific outreach to them, training them on the survey tool, how to access it, and then some specific outreach to some of the families that they work with, just encouraging them to, hey, participate. If there were some translation, support needed or survey completion support needed, that we could make sure that we provide that support. So there was some of that already. One of the reasons why we selected the Student Fusion group is because it truly is a kind of a broader representation across different clubs and activities and whatnot. And as we met with that group, you could kind of feel that it was a representative student group with some different opinions and interests, et cetera. And then, not just choosing one of our advisory groups for our, how we're going to get parent or community member feedback. I think we were intentional about doing a selection of each of our advisory groups. And what that did was, over time, I believe, for each of our family advisory groups, we've been intentional to either invite or nudge individuals from a variety of perspectives to participate in those advisory groups. And so I think if we were to draw from those same groups, we could be strategic to try to have balance in that representation. If in the public process we were to have, a community component or that additional kind of interview or meeting that Barb was talking about, that might have, a larger group of 40 or whatnot that would be able to provide feedback. So I will say I think we've been as intentional as possible to make sure that we're hearing all voices in this data that we've already collected. And I think next steps, we could make sure that we're intentional to have a wide range of perspectives in the room. If we were to do that school community member kind of large interview setting.
Okay, so, oh, sorry.
I just want to clarify, just so maybe I missed it, but I just want to make sure I'm on the same page. So what we're talking about is we had put in like a tentative Q&A session that evening, I think on the 5th. And you're saying in lieu of that, embedding into the day with tours and such would be pulling, a few people from each of these various groups, and they would be the ones that would be giving a Q&A session with the potential or with the finalists, and then we would be able to get that feedback.
Correct, and thank you for asking for that clarification. So that was one of the things we talked about doing in the evening. With the turnaround, with your interview being in the morning the next day, we thought if we could incorporate those folks into the daytime activities,
It's perfect.
that we'd be able to share it with you sooner as well, but we would definitely include those folks. It wouldn't be an open, everyone show up who wants to participate, because we might get 2 people and we might get 300. It would be very targeted representatives of all of the groups that are a part of the Wayzata Public Schools. Is that okay?
Yep. And then I guess to piggyback on that, those groups then, whoever's going to be that spokesperson would have the opportunity to ask the rest of the group to give input, that they would be maybe the person that would be the spokesperson or the person asking those questions that are coming from those various groups.
It depends on, we could do 2 ways. We could show up and put questions on a comment card and turn it in to myself and Director Lutz, and we'd ask questions of the group. Or we could ask everyone in advance, send all the interview questions you want to ask or things you want to know about, send them to MSBA. We'll go through and combine the ones that are similar, and we'll have a set list of questions. Because if we only have an hour and a half, we want to get to what the majority of the group is interested in learning. So by asking them for their questions in advance, and then we screen them for legality and for the things that align with what the leadership profile is seeking, then we simply ask the questions that are on the predetermined questions. So we don't get down a rabbit hole with people asking questions and then they ask a follow-up question and an hour later you haven't gotten to academic rigor. So we want to make sure that we have, I think it's a better route to gather questions and pre-screen and create them in conjunction.
That's what feels right to me, is
Does
like
it?
maybe
Okay.
giving everyone in the group an opportunity and then saying this is the 1 or 2 people that are going to be our, they're going to be asking the questions, and doing that for the group makes sense versus the day of.
Thank you.
So, Barbara, I like this idea a lot, and I'll tell you why. Because in my former life, okay, so I was not VP of R&D. Let's say I was vice president of R&D, and I was hiring a lab manager. During the interview, I would want that lab manager to go to the lab and talk to the technicians and chemists and anybody else that would be reporting to them. So in addition to the community participating, I think it would be very beneficial for the executives that would be reporting to the superintendent to see, how they would be able to interact, and what they see as their strengths and their wonderment, and then report back to the board. Eventually, obviously, the board will decide, but I think that's a great idea. The other comment I had was, because the time is so short, the evening before that Friday, if we can make that as brief as possible, only high level, so the board does not have to spend hours that evening at night, I think that would be helpful. If it takes that long, that's fine too. But because the next day is going to be very busy all day, so yeah. So those are my comments. So, but I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing from the board is I should work with Executive Director Lutz on a plan for the 5th of March. Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much for that input. I appreciate it. We're next going to move on to the interview training, and I'm going to distribute an abbreviated copy. What was emailed to you was very, very long. And so this is an abbreviated version, but I'm going to screen share the long version. There's just quite a few things in the long version. There's probably 30 pages of policy that we don't need to print, but I'm going to review it here as well. So I'm going to hand this out to you for just a minute. Amy, could you get me to screen share again? I think I've got it up. All right. Thank you so much. So this is our interview training and preparation step. So I'm going to go through this in fairly quick fashion because you do have it to read if you'd like. But there's some really key things I'd like to point out. In the interview training packet, we always share the leadership profile to remind folks of what you are seeking in the next leader for Wayzata. Your strategic roadmap, but this page We've spent a lot of time on this page since your application window closed. That and the report I just shared with you. So this is just a reminder of how the process has unfolded to this point and what your timeline is. So in looking at the timeline, I'll just do a few very quick reminders. All right, tonight's meeting is February 4th, right here, meeting for interview training and to discuss the public input report, interview questions, and the round 1, round 2 procedures. We've already decided that round 1 will be with the subcommittee, those 3 days at the end of February. They'll be coming back on, let's see here, March 2nd, I believe. March 2nd. The subcommittee conducts the interviews this day, 3 days, and then March 2nd, they will make a recommendation to the board. Candidate names will still be candidate A, B, and C. I want to thank you very, very much for your help with the fact that this is private data that you are dealing with. I know it can be very tempting to look at your computer when you're sitting in a coffee shop, but I really want to thank you for that because that enables us to get excellent categories and pools of applicants to know that their name is being held private in accordance with our laws here in Minnesota. But on March 2nd, you will have an opportunity as a full board to hear from the subcommittee as to why they're recommending candidate B, D, and L out of the pool that they interviewed. You can choose to accept or not accept that recommendation. And that night, ultimately, you will name the finalists. You'll make the motion to move forward to round 2, candidates B, C, and L. If that passes, then at the conclusion of that meeting, we read out loud the names of the round 2 finalists. Everyone else that was interviewed and everyone else who applied, those names never are made public because they were not interviewed by the board, correct? They were interviewed by a subcommittee of your board. Open meeting law doesn't apply to that because of your policy. So we want to just be sure that you're aware, even if the subcommittee is interviewing these folks, those names are private data. We're comfortable with that? Thank you. All right, then you see here, it does say March 6th. Here at 8:30 in the morning, you'll hold your second round of interviews. We are going to ask a member or two of the board to do some reference checks between maybe March 2nd and March 6th. It's not a heavy lift, but it is some due diligence that we encourage board members to do those reference checks. We want it in an organized fashion, however, so that all 7 of you are not making calls randomly about your finalists. So we'll be talking about that more, I think, in preparation either on the 9th of February or the 2nd of March. Who on the board is interested in making reference check calls, and then I'll work with you to sort of go through a process of how that should be done. All right? Between now and then, you cannot be making any reference check calls because these names are private data. We've done reference checking. We can only call the folks, however, that are listed on their application as references or have written letters of recommendation, because if we call anyone else, we've just outed their candidacy to people who may not know they are looking. So we're limited until those names are public with who we can talk to. Once those names are public on March 2nd, you can call anyone because their name is public, okay? And then if it goes well on the 6th, we don't have the 5th on here, but it's on the brochure. So candidates are holding the 5th and 6th for round 2. Board meetings, however, is only on the 6th. You do not need to come, and we really don't want you to come to anything on the 5th of March. That's the day in the district without the decision makers tagging along, all right? If all goes well, that afternoon, you will find someone you'd like to enter contract negotiations with, which can begin immediately. We are doing some research and working with Executive Director Lutz on some contract language. We're also investigating the possibility of performance incentives. I didn't forget that that was a part of our conversation during the creation of the salary range. So we're going to be bringing some suggestions to you in that regard. There would be a lot of research that needs to be conducted before something such as an incentive pay is included in there, but I think it's something we need to address and let you talk about as a board. So those wheels will be in motion. So beginning on the 7th of March, maybe even the night of the 6th, you can enter negotiations and hopefully sometime in March, finalize a contract and approve it as a board with your new leader. Any questions on that timeline? Yes.
You mentioned 2 board members calling references. And if I heard you correctly, they can call references not even on the applicant's list of references. Is that correct?
Yes, once their name is final.
Right, but outside the
Call
ones
anyone.
that were given to us.
Yes.
Okay.
You can
That
call
is-
anyone because now their name is public. It's not even a reference check. It's more because reference check sort of implies it's someone listed as a reference. these are people who may know this person. You know, education is a small world sometime, and you might know someone who's worked with them or know someone who is a business leader in the community that has a partnership with their district. You can call those people about their candidacy here in Wayzata because their names are public. Okay? All right, so let's move on to interview training then. I'm going to go through a couple of things, and I've got the abbreviated packet because this is an important one right here, and this is in your shorter packet.
Barb, I have a quick question before we move on. Sorry,
yes.
with the schedule. It was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it'll be us that's negotiating the contract and not MSBA. Is that the case, or am I remembering that incorrectly?
You are remembering correctly that MSBA does not negotiate the contract.
Okay.
We do have the model superintendent contract that MSBA and MASA have agreed upon. And so both associations support this version of the contract. However, most districts, particularly in the metro, like to lean on their HR executives and their counsel for the contract negotiations. And so we will not work on negotiations for you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks for the chance to clarify that as well. All right, so in the relevant law area, there are things you cannot ask about. Now, the questions that I'm going to be proposing for you tonight adhere to all of the restrictions around protected classes and categories and so on and so forth. The reason we want to remind folks that there are things you cannot ask about really are twofold. We're going to discourage you from asking follow-up questions during the interviews because follow-up questions could go down, you know, a slippery slope, and you might end up talking about religion or age or family, and that's not allowed to be considered as part of this process. So that's one reason. I had the second reason. It was right there. Follow-up questions. It'll come to me. Oh, your board notes. That's why. Because your board notes during the interview process, you're going to have to write stuff down about people because these are going to be tremendous interviews. And so you're not going to remember everything everybody says. So you're writing down things about them that you like or areas of concern you have. Please do not write anything down in your notes that touches on any of these protected categories. Your notes as board members would be subject to a data request. And if you in your notes have written down things about their age or gender or race, you know, not appropriate. So please don't write anything down in these classes as well. That's why we want to make sure you know about it. There's several pages that talks about the interview questions, things that are protected, things you cannot ask, permissible to ask. I'm not going to spend time on these. I just want you to be aware that they're in here. I do think, however, that based upon the needs of this district, there are far more important things for you to ask about than any of these things that are considered protected classes. I just want to make sure you're aware that there are some things that are permissible to ask, but I'm going to go right past that. All right, the policies are not in your abbreviated packet because there's a lot of them. These are our model policies. They are not specific to Wayzata. But I do want to talk about the model policy we have that I know you've adopted because you are an equal employment opportunity employer and we are an equal employment opportunity search firm. So that's very important to make sure everyone knows we're adhering to all of the requirements therein. The next policy I want to talk about is 406, public and private personnel data. I'm going to jump ahead to the third page. On this page, halfway down, it says, and we talked about this before. Oops. I don't have my mouse. I'm using my finger. There we go. Names of applicants are private data, except when applicants are considered by the school board to be finalists for public employment. So the names of applicants are private data, except when applicants are considered by the school board to be finalists for public employment. So then it begs the question, what is a finalist? And this is where statute is a little, in my opinion, not consistent, because it does talk about what a finalist is. And it defines a finalist as an individual who is selected to be interviewed by the school board for a position. So in round 2, it's your finalists. In round 1, it is your semifinalists. If the board had selected to have the entire board interview the semifinalist, their name goes public. So a finalist is someone who's going to be interviewed by all of you. Now, in your case, it's true. The semifinalists will be interviewed by the subcommittee. The finalists will be interviewed by the board. But I always tell folks, their name still goes public even if you're a semifinalist if the full board's interviewing you. So that's just one of those quirks, I think, of statute. The next one, oh, sure, go ahead.
Subcommittee, so the questions obviously we'll go through them, they'll be scripted. But this was a good reminder not to make a note. I think that's great. So for subcommittee, then they shouldn't note down the name of the candidate when they are going through the first round then? Or they have to
That
go
is
by
an
number?
excellent question. The subcommittee will refer to them in their notes as candidate A,
Candidate one.
B, and C.
Okay.
Thank you for asking that. Okay. The last policy that is a part of superintendent search are simply the open meetings and closed meetings. And we talked about the fact that as a board, you cannot close a board meeting during the superintendent search. You may only close a board meeting for your superintendent in terms of their evaluation. Conducting the evaluation, not choosing the goals and standards by which to evaluate them. That will be done in the public. A big part of that will be the transition workshop that I'll come back and do with the board and the new superintendent this fall. So those expectations will be done in an open meeting as well. So open and closed meetings, we'll get past that one. See, I didn't need to print all of this. All right. This one, other search considerations based upon statute. I don't think this is in your abbreviated packet, but I'm not having Lex zooming in, so I'm just going to talk about it and hope people could zoom in on at home if they're interested. So we want to make sure people are very aware of a couple limitations. One is that you have to let me know if you're related to a candidate within the 4th degree. I think we talked about that during the do's and don'ts at the planning meeting, and it has happened twice in the last year that someone on the board is related by blood or marriage to one of the people in the pool. So let me know if that's the case. I haven't heard from any of you, so I don't think it applies in Wayzata. It would simply mean that we would need a unanimous vote of the full board for that person to be hired. A majority would not be allowed to hire that person, and all 7 people would need to cast a vote. So if someone is ill and not at the meeting, you need to meet again and take a full vote of everybody unanimously in order for someone to work for you as their superintendent. That's not the case, so that's good. And then the other thing I always say here is keep in mind that you cannot require residency. Many people want them to live within the district boundaries, but for purposes of residency, it's just like a teacher. A superintendent is a teacher for the purposes of these statutes, and it includes moving to your district. So they could live anywhere as long as they're meeting the criteria you have laid out in your job description and in your contract. If they can do the work living 300 miles away that you spell out, that'd be very tough to do, I think, but they could be hired as your superintendent. Yes.
You would have screened all that, right, before you recommend the candidates?
We'll have screened for residency.
Yeah, all the requirements and everything.
We know where they live, and
Right.
they know that in order to do the job that's going to be expected of them, they should live pretty close to Wayzata Public
So
Schools.
You
what
mean
my question is,
immigration
as a board
status?
member, I don't have to worry about those things, right?
No, the only time it might worry me is someone might offer in their interview, by the way, I'm planning to move here. I'm going to buy a house. I have 10 kids that are going to contribute to the enrollment in this district. Those are all personal facts, and the fact that they're going to move here should be struck from the record. Just, you can't consider that even if they offer it up. So that's when I'd say disregard what they said about moving here. It's not something you should consider.
Barb, is a question maybe that MSBA has screened for all of the requirements that somebody would need to be employed in Wayzata Public Schools? That's a true statement, I think, correct?
Right.
Licensure is the big one.
Yep.
Yes. We don't do any I-9 certifications, so once they're hired, proof of employment to work in the United States is up to the hiring authority, the I-9 verification. We will not do that, but we'll do background checks on everyone that we are recommending as a part of our services automatically. And their national criminal database checks and lots and lots and lots of other stuff. Thank you for clarifying. So yes, but residency, we don't really screen for. Sorry if I misunderstood that.
My question was answered. I thought maybe the question had been misunderstood, and Director Lutz clarified the question, and you answered it, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Keep in mind that you can negotiate a contract for up to 3 years, and you can begin negotiating another contract within the last 365 days of their 3rd year of the contract, if it's a 3-year contract. So if you really like this new superintendent, I highly encourage you in July of 28 or whatever year that would be, start talking about locking them in for the following July, because you are allowed those 365 days.
And I think, Dave, if I'm not, I think that's what we've been doing, right? With our, like previously, prior to, I know the last several superintendent contracts we've been doing kind of year to year. But prior to that, we've always looked at 3-year contracts, and the year prior to that is when we renew.
I believe that's true.
Okay.
All right, thank you. This is in your packet, common interview mistakes. You will not make any of these. For example, you have very specific selection criteria, and it is backed up by the Public Input Engagement Survey. So you know what you're looking for. If you had not defined that early in the process, you would get all kinds of different leaders applying for the position, but you had some very specific things you're looking for, and those are the sort of people that then thought, this sounds like me and I'm going to apply, so that's great. You won't make a bad impression. I will tell you, though, candidates these days are interviewing you as much as you are interviewing them. It does happen sometimes after the interview, the candidate withdraws from consideration. I don't think that will happen with this board, but please do know that they are trying to find the fit for them just as much as you're trying to find a fit for you. So keeping that in mind. We're not going to violate the don't ask list because we just talked about that. One of the things with questions, I think we're getting better at creating questions that are behavior-based, looking for evidence and examples specifically of things you have done. We don't have a lot of questions anymore that say, well, what would you do if anyone could answer that if they're good at interviews and they are eloquent, right? We're looking for some concrete examples to support their experience in the areas important to this board. So you're not going to have vague questions. I can assure you of that. Keep in mind the big picture. This is a big decision, but it's also a monumental decision for the candidate as well as for all of you as board members. Probing motivation, this is a little tricky because we prefer you not ask those follow-up questions unless they're clarifying that you didn't understand an acronym or a reference to a program or something like that. I think your subcommittee is going to have more flexibility in that round 1 interview because you will be able to really learn from these people what drives them. And when they do answer a question, you'll have a rubric. But I think in that setting, I would be more comfortable allowing some follow-up questions to really understand what they are sharing with you. That would be my recommendation. But as a whole board, when we're in a public meeting and it's recorded and such, just be careful not to ask follow-up questions that could take us off in a whole new direction. We'll stick to what we need to know. Not a one-way street. We talked about that already, that they are interviewing you too. Your notes, subject to data requests, keep them professional and appropriate. You'll be good, but do remember that your brain's going to be very tired, even after interviewing 3 people. With the level of intellect and the responses you're going to be getting, you really should jot down the things that stand out to you about these people as they speak, because the 3rd interview, you're going to be tired after the first 2 interviews. So notes are really important. Take your time making a decision. You don't need to rush. The plan right now is that you'll choose someone to enter negotiations with on the 6th of March. If it doesn't feel right, you can hit pause and reconvene the next week. You always have options, so please don't feel pushed into something or make a decision that you're not comfortable with as a board. Don't take the wrong fit. Aligns very much with what I just said. And I do want to speak about bias just for a moment. It's important that folks are aware of it. I know that this board is aware of it as well. There is a page in your abbreviated packet about unconscious bias. The easiest way to explain this in this context is I'll give you examples of when bias has entered the deliberation stage. The questions aren't biased. The review of the applications were not biased. However, during deliberations, sometimes things will occur. So I'm just going to share this with everybody so that you can listen to one another and be aware of it during the conversation. One of them that seems to occur pretty regularly is age bias and assumptions that we make about people based on their age. One that I thought was very interesting is 2 candidates were in the finals. The board really wanted someone who understood technology. And they said, they asked the question and both candidates answered it well. And then during deliberations, someone said, well, I think that, we'll pick Sue and Tom. I think that Sue knows a whole lot more about technology. I mean, look at how old she is. Tom was much older. And they made that assumption, and the joke was on them because the younger candidate didn't tweet, didn't want to do anything online, just had a social media Facebook page. And the older candidate was a prolific tweeter, 5, 6, 7 things a day. So they made an assumption that I think hurt that process a bit about technology and about age. So that's one example. The other one, and the reason we actually started doing bias training was, again, a board, this was about 5 years ago, had 2 finalists. And during deliberations, they're talking about what they liked about the candidates, and some of them were willing to share what they weren't as happy with. We've since changed approaches and recommended, don't talk about deficits unless we need to break a tie. Let's keep it positive. But at that time, boards were willing to share more, and we were thinking, oh, it's okay if you share concerns. Now, with all the things being live streamed and recorded and such, we just don't think that's fair to candidates. But at that time, someone said, you know what? I think Tom would be great here. Very direct, straight shooter. People in this community are going to respond to that really, really well. And lots of nodding around the table. And then they move on to the next candidate, and the exact same board member said, you know what? Sue's a straight shooter. She's pretty direct. I don't think that's going to play well here in this community. Verbatim, the comment, with the tone of voice being negative for Sue and a positive for Tom. So what do you think that bias was? Gender bias, a gender bias. The assumption that women leaders are warmer or nurturing or should be, and men should, right? These are the shoulds are where bias really get us in trouble. That was a very clear example of it. And we just thought, okay, we need to start talking about this so people are aware of during the interview process, and what you say in public about your candidates will matter. People will be watching. So that was another one. We also hear geographic bias quite a bit. The assumption that people from greater Minnesota aren't going to fit in here. And people in greater Minnesota thinking, oh, those metro people, they're not going to fit in here. Please don't do that. I have to tell you how excited we are about your pool. And it is not only from the metro area. So the geographic bias and sometimes the size of the school districts, that might cause you to have some assumptions about these people. Set those aside also. And then the final bias that we see is familiarity bias. It's a difficult word to say. If you're familiar with someone, whether they're in your conference or your kids go to school and you know these people, if you know them, that is a benefit and a disservice to that client that candidate, because you know them, right? You know all the good things about them, and you may know some things that you don't like. Do try to set that aside. It's difficult because there'll be names you probably recognize, and there'll be names you've never heard of before. So trying to keep an open mind with that familiar piece of things can be challenging, but I just wanted to highlight it because it exists. Are there any questions on bias? I'm not going to speak any more about it. I think your board is already ready to have this conversation, but just an awareness of it at the deliberation table especially. All right, we're just about done.
Sorry, would you be able to ask questions or clarify when we are deliberating, or it's just, so you as an observer, if you feel, hey, there is some unintended bias, would you interject and ask that board member more questions, or
I don't think I would do that during the
Okay.
deliberations. I don't want anyone to feel as though I'm correcting them in a public meeting. I trust the board to self-manage those comments. If
Okay.
it becomes problematic, yes, we're going to
Sure.
talk about it, but I won't be facilitating the conversation either. Chair Malind will be,
Oh, okay.
Mahoney will be,
Oh, so that's the board meeting. Oh,
board will be
gotcha,
deliberating.
gotcha.
I'll be
Okay.
here, sitting over here,
Yeah,
sitting over
okay.
there. But
Got
we
it.
will have a process, and we'll explain kind of how you walk
Mhm.
through and what you do. Positive comments, and then we do reference. So we'll lay it out, but I'm not going to facilitate the conversation. This board's going to do it, and you'll do a great job. All right, I do want to talk lastly about deliberation scenarios, because I think you're going to have a difficult choice. I think there's more than one really great candidate that applied for your job. So I want to at least acknowledge the potential for getting stuck during deliberations. If there's not one clear rock star winner, it's a good problem to have when you have so many good people that the final 3 are so strong you just don't quite know what to do. So what might you do if people on the board start digging in because they are convinced as individuals that this person is the best, and other board members think this person is the best? No one is willing to move. I'll suggest what you might do in that case. One is go back to your public input summary report, right? I saw some of you thinking about that already. Pull that out and say, well, look, this is what's important to our parents in this community, and our guardians say this. Look at what our staff are looking for, to some degree, because I agree, people are kind of cross-referenced there, but pull that out and refer to it. Also, please go back to that leadership profile as needed. Even if you are stuck between two people who are phenomenal, you could, as a board, discuss, look, our first criteria is this. Let's talk about Sue and Tom around this criteria, and then let's talk about them around this criteria. And just very methodically work your way through that leadership profile and talk about your candidates. That helps too. Those are the two best things I would say you could do. Questions on that? That one? Yes.
So now that you're talking about deliberations, is this done after the interview is done, while the candidates are still sitting here?
Thanks for asking that. It is after, let's say there's 3 interviews, and by noon you're done with all 3 interviews. That is when you start your deliberations about who to make an offer to. So they're not here anymore. The candidates are gone.
Okay.
But you've concluded all 3 interviews before you start talking about the folks and making your decision. So
But it's
after,
still being recorded
correct?
for the public to see, so we're still visible to the community, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
May I ask one more clarifying question? During interview, but it's not going to be recorded it's not going to be available immediately, I hope so that the second and third candidate would not be able to see. Otherwise, they would know, obviously, what's going on. Am I right?
Thank you for asking that. We will recommend you not live stream those interviews because it does give an advantage to the last candidate or two to watch. I think the professional integrity of these folks, I don't think they would do that. However, we don't want to even open the door to it. So I would suggest not live streaming the interviews. Some districts do like to record them, however. And what they often do is the successful candidate's interview is posted on the website. The 2 people who were not offered the position, those interviews aren't posted. It's up to you. Generally speaking, the candidates who are not selected will be disappointed and may or may not want their interview out there into perpetuity on your website. But the candidate who's successful, that might be something you could place out there so people who couldn't come here and watch the interviews could watch the successful candidate's interview with the board. That's something you can think about. But yes, you're absolutely right. We don't want people watching them ahead of time and knowing what the questions are and things, okay? Sometimes in deliberations, it happens because this is a very important decision and stress levels can be reaching a peak at the end. If it becomes heated and it starts to devolve into an unproductive conversation at some point, the very best thing is call a recess. Just the chair, you can gavel a recess or someone can request a recess. Just go for a walk, get a drink of water, get a fresh air. That sometimes really helps bring the temperature back down if the deliberations are not going smoothly. I doubt that's going to happen. It does sometimes, but just be aware you can call a recess as needed just to take a break. And then the last thing is the rumor mill. During deliberations, one board member says they have information from credible sources about these finalists. We'll talk more about this once the names go public, because once the names of those top 2 or 3 people go public, you will be lobbied by people in favor of and against all 3 of those folks. And so we just simply want you to say, thank you for the input, I appreciate it. Do not engage, but hearsay should not be shared in a public meeting at this board table. So during deliberations, please do not say, well, someone I know works in that district and they said this, and it's going to be not great, right? Don't do that in this room. If you have concerns about things you're hearing about your folks that are named publicly, call me, because our job will be to investigate those things, and there's a really good chance we already know about it, and we have a really good explanation for why they still deserve to be your superintendent. But do reach out to me if you have concerns. Don't handle it on your own, and don't encourage people. Just thank people for input, because people will do that, and you should be listening to them, right? They're going to have some good opinions that might guide you in your decision-making. So that's it for deliberations. I'm not going to do anything with these interview questions because I have some much, much, much better ones for you to consider. These are generic. They're part of the training packet, but we have questions created specifically for Wayzata. All right, lastly, the candidate's turn. They're going to ask you questions. I'm hoping that if we allow an hour to an hour and a half per candidate, that they will time it well. So if you have 15 questions, they're done with 15 minutes left maybe. They're going to ask you some questions about the district. Please speak up. The chair will field the question, may answer the question, or may say, who would like to answer this one? And I would hope that several board members will do that and build upon one another. Very often, they're wanting to see how you interact with each other, how you build on each other's ideas, how you support one another in conversations, how you respectfully disagree or have another option for them to think of. So please participate if they ask you questions. One of the things that I have seen lately, I'm always impressed. These are some possible questions. There are sometimes candidates that will ask you a very specific management-related question. Why might they ask the school board a management-related question?
So to know that if you are willing to go into his work and do work for him, I mean, superintendent's supposed to do management work.
Correct. They are trying to ascertain how much micromanaging you're going to do of your superintendent. And if this board has an answer to a very technical, very management-oriented question, it's going to tell them this isn't a governing board. This is a micromanaging board, so I'm going to think about this. So be honest, be authentic, be yourselves in your answers. Just be careful you don't get trapped into trying to answer a very specific question that your executive leadership team should be the ones who know those things. That's not your role as board members, correct? So that's been interesting. I don't know if everyone does it, but some people recently have done it. And one person pulled out of a search because the board knew way too much about the day-to-day operations of the district. Okay? Isn't that a fun thing to think about? I think, no, candidates are phenomenal. All right, the last thing in here is reference checks. And we will be discussing when we come back in March which two board members want to do some reference checking on behalf of the board. And I have sample questions. You'll also be giving that report verbally to the board after round 2. You're not going to type anything up. You're not going to quote anyone, but I do have a packet for the folks that are going to be doing reference checks. So please consider whether that is something that you'd be interested in doing and have the time to do between March 2nd and March 6th. That's a pretty small window. I believe that's all I have. We've already done deliberating in public. And here's our sample model contract. And I believe Executive Director Lutz already has a copy of this, as well as the current contract with Dr. Anderson. So are there any questions about interview training? I know that was a lot, but I think we covered the things that are most important.
Barb, one quick question. So the candidate will have an opportunity to ask questions as we go through interview. Is that a possibility even during the 5th March, where, let's say, the SLT members, the parents, when they are asking questions, would they have questions for audience, or when would they talk to, for example, SLT team, just to feel how the leadership team is, etc.? How does that happen?
I think they're going to be asking a lot of questions of your executive leadership team while they're getting the tour.
Oh, okay.
The large group of 20, 30, 40 people, I hesitate to open it up for them to answer questions from the candidate because some of them may not know how to answer those questions and they could scare off a really good candidate with an inappropriate answer. So I don't know if I'd let them answer questions, but I'm sure that you all will get lots of them during the tour.
Yeah, so tentatively on that day prior, we'd have executives, myself, Dana, and Trevor would participate in that tour, and that'd be an opportunity to have some informal Q&A going from site to site. When we arrive at sites, we would have a principal and some student reps meet us there. And so we obviously wouldn't be able to go to every site in the district, but would be able to have, some good representation of our districts with sites visited.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. We'll try not to scare them away either. I'll bring candy.
All right, thank you. So this is the last part of the meeting that I needed to complete with you tonight. These are the proposed round one questions. I think what I'd like to do is give you 10 minutes, 10 minutes. I want to point out that each of these areas are one of your hiring criteria, your leadership profile bullet points. So for example, question 1 is usually just a softball. It's a good way to get the ball rolling, that kind of thing. But questions 2 through 7 are based on that leadership criteria. Questions 8 through 12, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what I'd like to do is give you some time to select, let's try 2 questions in each area as individuals. Just, I'm going to collect these back from you, but just circle the 2 that you like. So everyone gets 2 in each area. And that includes the last page, which are questions designed around the public input summary report. All right, because there were a couple of areas that bubbled up as being pretty important that we didn't have initially as much questions as we wanted. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. Everyone pick 2 in each category, and then I'm going to do a quick tally and see where we land. All right, thank you. If you've finished with them, why don't you hold on to them? Because I'm going to take a quick tally, but then I'll collect them back from everyone. Is that okay? Sure. Sure.
Barb, should we just circle the number, right? Once you, okay.
Is everyone okay if we start to take a tally on the numbers, or do you need to solve technical difficulties first? We're good? Okay. So just a reminder that these are the questions your subcommittee will be using. All right, so these are approved by the board for the subcommittee, and we will create a rubric around the selected questions to identify answers for these questions that might resonate, okay? So the simplest way to do this is just to raise your hand quickly if you liked the question, and I'm just going to do it 1 through 30, if that's all right with everyone. Tends to go faster, so I'm going to just make a quick count and make a note. So it goes quickly, but if you have questions, stop me. So how many liked question 1? Opening question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, yeah, that's pretty standard. All right, so questions 2 through 7, you could pick 2 of those that you liked. So as individuals, how many liked question 2? 2. Question 3. 1. Question 4. 3. 5. 1. 6. 1. And 7. 5. All right, the next section, questions 8 through 12. Question 8. 1, 2, 3. Question 8 had 3, correct? 1, 2, and 3. Okay. 9, 2, 10, 4. Question 11. 1, 12. 5. All right, questions 13 to 18. Please raise your hand if you liked 13. 1, 14. 1, oh, 2, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. 2, 14. 15. 6, 16. 1, 17. 3, 18. 2. Next section, 19 to 23. Who liked 19? 3, 20. 1, 21. 6, 22. 2, 23. 2. 24 to 29. How about 24? 2, 25. 4, 26. 1, 27.
26.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. 2.
26.
Thank you. 27. 1, 28. 2, 29. 4. And the next section is 30 to 35. So question 30. 1, 31. 1. Question 32. 1, 2, 3, 4. 33. 3. 34. 2. 35. 2, 3. 36 to 41. How many liked 36? 3. 37. 1. 38. 3. 39. 3. 3. And 40. 1 and 41. 2, 3. Okay. Closing question, sort of standard. It's all right. Okay. And then the last page, I apologize for the wrong number, district number in question 2. That's an error. All right, so the first category, questions 1 through 3. You could pick, how many picked 2 in these or versus just 1?
2.
Did you pick 2?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do 2 because we'll see what pops up, right? How about question 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yay, all right. Question 2 with the right number, 0. How many question 3? I'm expecting that to be, okay. I could have guessed that, 7. All right, thank you. 4 through 7, question 4. 1, question 5. 3, 6, 4, and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 8 through 10. 8. 4, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to pick the ones that a majority of the board noted. One thing we're going to be careful of is not to have duplicate questions. And yet some of these, because we have a lot with 3, you are certainly welcome to advocate for a question. We don't have a limit on questions because we haven't yet determined how long round 1 will be. We'll be meeting with the subcommittee, I think on Zoom, maybe in the next week to decide if we can do an hour and a half or 2 hours with each person. Normally, we're like, how many questions can we do in an hour? But in this case, we have flexibility, I think, with the 3 days being set aside. Question 1, for sure. Question 7, for sure. Question 12. 15. 21. 25 and 29 got 4 votes. Are they different enough to include both 25 and 29? If they are, we'll ask both, because they got 4 votes for each.
Yeah. So the way I looked at question 25 and 29, they were kind of like a follow-up question. So start with 25 and 29 was follow-up. Again, that's how I read it.
Yeah.
But again, if we have to keep one, yes, there is that opportunity.
Okay, 25 and 29 both, I think, at this point. And I don't know if they'll be in that order or not. We'll kind of drop them into the interviews. They won't be in this exact order. That's too easy, right? We want to mix it up. Have the tougher questions in the middle to the middle of the end.
Is there a way to combine some of these questions rather than doing it as a follow-up? Okay.
Yes, that's an option as well. Obviously, we don't want to read it out loud tonight, but what sometimes happens is if the board's interested in combining 2 questions together, what I'll do is work with maybe one person from the board to wordsmith it over email. So I'll just make sure that that's what we use. So yes, we can certainly do that. All right, so 25 and 29. 32 had 4 votes. 36 to 41, there were lots of 3s. But I wonder if those questions are addressed by questions 6 and 7 on the next page, because questions 6 and 7 are similar. And they had 4 votes and one of them had 6 votes. 6 and 7, or one or the other, one in round 1, one in round 2. Are they too similar? But 6 and 7, I think, could fill the need for questions 36 to 41, where we didn't have unanimity on anything. But on the second page, for sure, question 1 and 3. I'm sorry, the back page, 1 and 3. And question 7 had 6, and question 10 had 5. Several others had 4 votes, but the ones that had the most were 1, 3, 7, and 10. Uh, 36 to 41 didn't have anything that had a majority of the board. So that's, I'm wondering, because of the category that it is, if question 7 would fit in that same area. Yeah. On the very last page, if question 7 would suffice for questions 36 to 41, there was more consensus around question 7.
Can you remind me what were the top 2 in that area? I know they were all scattered. Were there any? They were all 3s, basically.
In 36 to 41?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, it's 3, 1, 3, 3, 1, 3.
Would it be okay if in questions 36 through 41, I underline in 31 what I thought was very relevant that you could potentially add to number 7?
31, you said?
39.
Oh, 39, okay. Thank you.
Could I underline that? Like there's particular verbiage in there that I think is really important that is reflected also in our profile.
Yes.
Okay, let me
Is it toward the end of 39?
Yep.
That you want woven into question 7 on the last page?
Correct.
Does everyone hear where she's heading with that one?
Yeah, and I guess for whatever reason, I feel like the first sentence in 38 feels important for whatever reason to me, some of the language there. So I don't know if there'd be a way to maybe combine those two. Yeah. I
Or
had
38 could stand on its own
Yeah.
because it's very different than question 7.
That was my only thing when I was looking at the ones in the back. I feel like that's one that has a little bit like it's
So
tapped.
this is where you can advocate for questions where we only had 3 people or even a 1. You could say, I really feel this question's important because, and so I hear Director Little saying perhaps question 38 could be added in the mix.
Can
And
I-
heard
yeah,
Director
I
Gainer saying
I am very much, I think 38 and 39 are incredibly important. And I made a notation about why I think that's important, and I've underlined why I think we should add a portion to number 7. I'm wondering, Barb, and board colleagues as well, finance and budgeting bubbled up to the top for us and for our community and our students, actually, like it's across the board. I wonder if we lean into that, and if we have more questions, that's okay.
it is, especially because round 1, you're not limited to the 1 hour.
Yep.
So there's room. There is room.
Is that okay with everybody? I mean, I'd rather get the information, right? Instead of just being kind of boxed into
Yeah.
1 or 2.
I have a question in 30 through 35.
35?
Well, so in that bucket,
Okay, yes.
so the 32 is, I think, where we have most votes. And when I was looking at other options, 33, 35, it felt like it was more measurable. So it was actually, I mean, 33, 35 is talking about, okay, tell me what was the outcome versus,
Okay, sorry.
no, no.
Sorry.
So it's not a theory, it's actually the outcome oriented. So again, I think we can achieve it. There are, I think, enough questions, but just wanted to ask both colleagues that 32 felt more theoretical versus 33 and 35, they are much more outcome driven. But again, we don't have to change it, just wanted to find out.
One of the answers could be for 32 could be quantitative measures.
Sure.
This is how we measured it.
But the question doesn't, question is more theoretical, more theory.
Theoretical.
What was 33, 35? What was the vote?
32 had 4 votes, 33 got 3, 34 had 2, and 35 had 3.
Oh, so it's 33. Okay. Now, if we think the answer could be more outcome based, that's fine. Like I said, just wanted to check with everybody.
Keep in mind, you might be reading it a certain way, and just because, like, you might ask the question, and they might surprise you with how they're answering, and they could give you both responses.
Right.
And so it might actually be beneficial to have something that's not so prescriptive. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
And we can always go ahead and ask them, for example. Yeah, we can always ask them for specific examples with numbers. Right.
We're not doing follow-ups, are we?
The subcommittee, I think we're going to talk about that next week when we look at schedules.
Okay.
As to how much room you want, if you want clarifying follow-ups only or a deeper probe follow-up. You do have flexibility with the way you're conducting round 1 that you normally wouldn't have in this
Otherwise?
setting. So
Okay.
you certainly could. And I think the 3 of you will find a time to visit with Director Lutz and myself.
I would like to advocate for a question number 36 because it might be not popular, but at the same time, there is a specific goal. How many people voted for 36?
So I've heard someone advocating for 36 and 38. How the board feels about that?
Would 37 and
37.
would it not cover that in some shape or form?
37 feels familiar to 7.
Oh, okay.
I do think 36 is different and 38 is different, so we could add both of those or combine them somehow. This is really up to you as a board, whatever you'd like to do.
I voted for 36, so if you could add that
I
one.
also did. So, go for it. I was just going to do a quick time check. I am sort of at my limit. Is there anything that I would be missing if I were to leave at this point?
All I need is to collect the questions. I think the fact that you had a chance to identify that the questions you felt were best suited for round one is more than enough. This is the very last thing we're doing tonight, so.
It is curriculum night at the high school, so it's a really important
Deal.
night. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Alicia.
I missed which question got the most votes between 13 and 18.
Between 13 and 18.
Yeah.
All right, question 13 had 1, 14 had 2, 15 had 6, 16 had 1, 17 got 3, and 18 got 2.
Okay. So
That help?
15 was the one there. Okay.
15, yes.
Thank
Can I mention something since Sheila brought it up? Thank you. In those questions 13 through 18, when I looked at 15 and 18, I was wondering if there was a way to bring both of those together. Because in 18, if you look at word number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in that, I'll underline it. I think having that concept in the other question is important.
Word 4, 5, and 6. Those words could be woven into question 15 pretty easily. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So I'm going to review the questions I've circled, and we didn't land yes or no on a couple that were advocated for. But at this point, I am looking at question 1, 7, 12, 15 with those words included from 18, so 15, 21, 25, 29, 32, and the end of question 39 woven into question 7 on the back page, those last couple of words. Question 42, and on the last page, question 1, 3, 7, and 10.
Okay, there's one more I wanted to talk about. Board colleagues, number 35. This is something that we did face as a district, and I wonder if it would be worthwhile to include something around that.
There were 3 votes for
Yeah,
35.
Yeah,
I had
Yeah.
that 35 circle too.
that is something in our recent history that we've dealt with. Yep.
Am I seeing a majority of the board saying, yeah, question 35 should be included or not? Okay. I'm seeing nods, so I will circle 35.
This conflict is
Thank you.
between. I need to know.
Nope, can't do that.
No, I'm trying to, I'm asking clarifying question to Barb. So when you talk about through a challenging conflict, which conflict is this?
This would be
What kind?
someone's experience where they've managed to navigate something that has challenged them, and they're going to share what that was from their own experience.
It could be any conflict.
It
with
could be
them.
anything.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
You'd be surprised what people will share when you ask them things like
Okay.
that. That brings us to, I believe, about 14 questions by adding that one. I did not include the 36, 37, or 38 that someone had mentioned liking those as well. This is your chance to include them if you'd like. Sorry. This is a good number of questions. I think they're pretty in-depth. Now, if you remember from the application, those were pretty, and then round 1, we're getting down closer, but round 2 would be very specific. Scenario questions, maybe a presentation of some kind. So it's going to get more specific in the second round as well. But thank you for doing this, because I think it's important the full board had input on the questions that this committee is going to be
Can
asking.
I ask one?
Yes. Director
From
Hughes.
36 to 41, the topic is quite important, and I feel like there should be 2 questions taken.
So which one would you like to include possibly?
I would like to know which of the questions had closest ones, other than 36, which we made this.
36 had 3,
Mhm.
37 had 1, 38 had 3, 39 had 3, 40 had 1, and 41 had 3.
So basically, 38, 39, and 41. Between them would be nice to choose if it's
36, 38, 39, 41, they all had 3, correct.
What's the total number of questions you're up to right now, Barb?
13.
It's getting long.
Let's have 1 plus no 13.
I will do whatever this board directs me to do.
Did we take a portion of 39 and put it into another one?
7.
The
Yeah.
last,
So that's
I
what it is.
think, yeah, so we have 2 in this bucket.
Sort of 2, but
the last 6 words or so from 39, I made an arrow to go over to question 7 on the second page. I do not have any other ones circled, 36 through 41, and I only have 7 circled on the second page.
And again, this is for round 1.
Round 1.
So we still have an opportunity in round 2 to
Yes.
follow up on things. Okay. I'm okay with it the way that we've decided already.
so would you like to have or not?
We have already 14 questions, right? So
It's 14 right now?
Let me check. 1, 2,
I think we have 14, 13 or 14.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 right now.
Okay, thank you.
That is all I had for the board tonight. Thank you for your time and attention. I know it was a lot, but I really do appreciate it. And I'm very excited to meet with you again next week. I will be sending you something on Friday to indicate which candidates, A, B, C, D, et cetera, that we have taken the deepest looks at and are recommending as your semifinalists. However, please call me from when you receive that list until Monday night, because I think it's Monday I'm coming back, with questions about these individuals if you'd like to. I cannot share in an open meeting why or why not some things that might identify those folks, but I'm happy to answer your questions if you call me one-on-one. Weekends are fair game, so do reach out, and I can't wait to see you next week again.
Barb, was there anything that needed a vote this evening?
Usually this is all done by consensus.
Okay.
In our experience, unless some boards have the formality of wanting to take an action on something, they certainly may.
Thank you.
And you want this back, right?
That reminds me of one thing. May I share one final thing? I am so sorry. During the deliberation scenarios, I meant to mention something that is very important, and we'll talk about it again, which is when you are deliberating, obviously we're using positive comments about our candidates because they've been in the public eye. We also would encourage the board to share your authentic feelings about who is the strongest. And if it is clear that you are perhaps in a minority of who is going to be selected by the board as a whole, you have the option to change your vote to support the will of the board. It used to be that candidates would not walk into a split board. That was pretty clear. And it's safe. It's a split decision. Thank you. I'm going to respectfully decline the opportunity. It's more common now for people to come into a split board because it's becoming more common to have split boards. It is simply it's a good show of unity to the community, to the candidates, if you can come out of this with a 7-0 vote. Not required. You need a majority vote to hire someone. It is simply a very good idea to get to a unanimous vote if you are able to do so. The message it sends is very powerful, but I wanted to mention that during deliberations and I forgot, I'm sorry. Now I'm done.
You want this back, right?
I do want the questions back, please.
Okay, thank you, Barb, and thank you, Dave. Thank you, colleagues. I guess this concludes the Wayzata Public Schools special regular board meeting. The next regular school board meeting will be on Monday, February 9th. The time is now 7:15. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education special regular meeting for Monday, February 4th, 2026 is adjourned.